In the name of the one who loves us, the one who saves us, and the one who spurs us ever on. Well, good morning. It is so good to be back with you after a wonderful vacation with my family. And I am so grateful that I had that time away, but I am just delighted to be back because I've missed you all. You know, not too long ago, I read the story of a woman who went to church before going to work. And the sermon was rather long this morning. Of course, that doesn't happen here. And so in order to be on time for work, she had to leave right after communion. Now, the church was quite large and in the center of the city. So throughout the day, a variety of folks would make their way by the church. And as she was rushing out, she almost knocked down an older gentleman who was standing in front of the church just looking at the beautifully carved front doors. And so she apologized profusely and was about to leave when he asked her, "What is it you believe in there? What is this place all about?" She didn't know what to say, but after a few seconds, she said, "I'm sorry, but I'm late for work." And the gentleman said, "Sorry to bother." But throughout the day, she was bothered as she thought about those questions and how she would have answered them if she had a little bit more time. Did she tell him about the Nicene Creed or the Catechism and what all that means? Or, despite all appearances to the contrary, that the world is in God's hands? Well, in this morning's gospel, Jesus himself is asking his disciples a similar question about what they believe, who they believe him to be. And I imagine they felt much like that woman, like they were being given a pop quiz in school. And this wasn't that unusual for Jesus. He would often stop and ask them questions to see if they understood what he was teaching. And more often than not, they didn't get the answers right, or they just didn't understand. And he had to explain things all over again. So I bet they are more than a little anxious as Jesus begins this line of questioning. Who do these people say that the Son of Man is? Jesus often used that name to refer to himself, and they answer, one of the prophets, of course. But that's not what Jesus is looking for. So he asks them just a little bit differently. But who do you say that I am? And he's asking all of his disciples. Can you feel the silence? I'm wondering what is going on through their minds. And then Peter breaks in, speaking for the group as he often does. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. God love him. Peter, right or wrong, is not hesitant. He jumps right in with the answer, much like he jumped out of the boat when they saw Jesus walking on water. And his answer is the right one, the one Jesus had been waiting for. And Jesus blesses Peter in a big way for his faith. But there is a catch, as priest and theologian Barbara Brown Taylor says. Because while Peter's answer is the right one, it's not really his. Blessed are you, Jesus says, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. My Father in heaven. And yes, Jesus rewards him and gives him a new name, Rock, and new authority, even though in the very near future, in fact, next week, Jesus will say to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block." So what is there to take away from our gospel this morning? Peter on his own does nothing particularly great. He's impulsive and opinionated. And when push comes to shove, he denies Jesus. But what can be said in his favor is that he's not afraid to go first, to give things a try, to speak his mind. And when he fails or he makes a mistake, he gets up and he tries again, while all the other disciples are standing back, watching and waiting. Peter takes risks for Jesus. And for that and his recognition of Jesus' identity and really listening to God, Jesus blesses him. And what a blessing and responsibility he gives Peter. But it's evident what Peter says or does on his own is not what gives him authority or wins him the keys to God's kingdom. Jesus is clear that Peter's answer is God's answer, and that Jesus, not Peter, will build his church, and not us. But Peter will be part of the foundation, a rock, because he is chosen by God. And beloved, I believe that that is good news for all of us. You see, Jesus chose Peter, a bull-headed, big-hearted, fallible, stubborn, flawed person upon which to build Jesus' church. And while I might have preferred someone of flawless character, someone with spiritual depth and breadth, I am glad that he is the one in charge of heaven's gates. Because someone like Peter understands someone like me, someone like you, with all our flaws, who finds answers hard to come by, who sometimes says the wrong thing or fails to respond in the way that Jesus would want. Peter understands what it feels like to say things and to have regrets or break promises. Like, even if I have to die, I will not deny you. Which, in fact, he did. And so Peter shows us that blessedness is less about perfection and more about willingness. More about willingness. If you remember, Jesus' last encounter with Peter is not told by Matthew, but by, in fact, the evangelist John. And it takes place on a rocky beach that I had the privilege to visit a year ago. And it was here that the risen Lord had just finished cooking breakfast for his disciples. And as soon as they finished eating, Jesus turns to Peter and asks him not once, but 3 times, "Do you love me?" And 3 times Peter answers, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And 3 times Jesus replies, "Feed my sheep." Which, as one theologian puts it, is maybe the final answer of what Jesus is really looking for. Not one that is spoken, but an answer that is lived. Beloved, the real truth is about who Jesus is for each one of us shows up not on our lips, but rather in our lives. And each and every day, we discern just how we are being called to live out the answer to the question, "Who do you say that I am?" And there may be times when we do things that don't work out, or we too may say something stupid. But the important thing is to show up and to try. Not only to say what we believe, but more importantly, to live what we believe. And I think we do that so well here at St. John's. And I have certainly seen it in the care you have for one another and for our community during this time of COVID-19 pandemic. Anglican priest Bernard Eidings Bell reminds us, we need to forget the imaginary Christ who has been ours too long, and to rediscover the real Christ, the Christ of the prophets and the martyrs and the confessors, the Christ who is not only the lover of souls, but also master, a monarch with demands to make in industry, in finance, and in education, in human services, in the arts, in marriage, in the home. The Christ who is teacher of a social ideology which has eternal validity. The Christ who cries aloud with convincing force, "He who would save his life will lose it, and only he who is willing to lose his life can find it." Friends, as brothers and sisters of Peter, whether we fail or succeed, whether we give the right answer or the wrong ones, we too have been chosen. We too are blessed. We too are pieces of the one true rock, the church of Jesus Christ, built by him, against which even the powers of death cannot crush. The same question he asked Peter and the disciples, he continues to ask of us. And my hope and prayer is that you, like me, see Christ as your sure foundation and the source of your identity. You know, the history of Christianity cautions us how vulnerable we are to complacency as Christians, and how easy it is to slip into idolatry by placing our hope on political or denominational or ethnic loyalties. So today, friends, be emboldened and inspired like Peter to be faithful to Jesus' teachings and open to the voice of Jesus that speaks not only through the church, but through the living witness of all of us as his followers. And through our lives, may the world know that love, not hate, light, not darkness, and truth in and through our differences can overcome despair, and through Christ, even death. May it be so.